All right, welcome everybody. I want to welcome you to this academic year's webinar series for Penn AI Tech. Penn AI Tech is the Penn Artificial Intelligence and Technology Collaboratory for Healthy Aging. It's an initiative at the University of Pennsylvania funded by the National Institute on Aging. And we are launching this year's webinar series. We're very happy to have with us Indu Navar, and I'm going to quickly introduce our speaker and hand it over to her. Over the past 20 years, Indu has served as CEO, founder, board member, and investor on several Silicon Valley software companies, during which she led the development of innovative products resulting in successful exits. And in 2019, after she lost her husband to ALS, she focused on bringing her skills in building scalable platforms and technology innovations to patient-driven health ventures. Since 2019, Indu has been CEO and founder of the Peter Cohen Foundation, which functions as EverythingALS.org, a 501(c)(3) nonprofit organization focused on technology-based solutions to the discovery of biomarkers for neurological diseases. Early in her career, Indu was on the ground floor of several successful technology companies, including WebMD and Silicon Graphics. She started as an engineer at NASA in Moffett Field. She has a BS in electrical engineering from Bangalore University in India and an MS in computer science from California State University. And she's currently pursuing her PhD in neuroscience in King's College in London. I want to remind you all that you can post questions using the Q&A feature on your Zoom interface. And upon completion of Indu's talk, we'll get a chance to have a discussion and answer some of these questions. So thank you again, Indu, so much. It's a great honor to have you here, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, George. Thank you for having me here this morning. And also, I'm from California, so as we said, in Silicon Valley. So let me start sharing my presentation here. And today I'm going to talk about digital health in ALS research. And like George mentioned, I got into this because of my husband, who got diagnosed with ALS, and unfortunately he passed away. And this was us getting covered in Wall Street Journal. I would have died to have anybody cover us, any of the innovations that I was working on by Wall Street Journal. But I never in my life thought that this is the reason why we will be on the in Wall Street Journal is through losing my husband. But what it has taught me is that there's so much more innovation we can do with our journey all the way from diagnosis, which took us about 2 years, where there was diagnosis fatigue and also post-diagnosis, and how we were actually conducting clinical trials and the outcome of the clinical trials, how it was reported, was a big gap that we noticed, I noticed, and hence the birth of EverythingALS, which is really Peter Cohen Foundation, named after him. And if you really look at the massive unmet need in brain health, in just neurodegenerative disease, it is 1 in 6 people are going to be impacted by 2030. And this is today, out of the $4 trillion spent every year annually, over $1 trillion is spent on brain health. When I say brain health, I mean neurodegenerative disease. So a lot of them do not have any treatment. So it's really looking at end-of-life management. And this is a 14% of the global disease burden, and with a 2 to 5 years to live, because it's detected so late as well. So what we are focused on is confronting the realities of ALS, but this platform is really applicable for any of the neurodegenerative disease, but our first entree is in ALS. Imagine this: every 90 minutes, somebody is getting diagnosed with ALS, and they're hearing the same thing we heard in 1939, that you have 2 to 5 years to live. It is unimaginable that we have not moved a needle from past 100 years since we've known about the disease. And neurodegenerative disorders are the second highest cause of death globally. And I'm going to play, what we have been doing and a little bit of a status, and then I'll walk you through how we use AI and machine learning as a platform to really move the needle for neurodegenerative disease. And this is our overview and a highlight of what we accomplished and how we work. And like I said, EverythingALS is today a well-known name in ALS, and which is part of Peter Cohen Foundation with our mission to bring technology innovations to neurodegenerative disease, starting with ALS. And we actually do a lot of research projects, and which we'll highlight here shortly.
I have the honor of serving as the chairman of the board after founding Cure ALS and steering it into a merger with Everything ALS.
A disease where people might live 3 years, basically a third of their time is spent going to different doctors.
This is a clinical diagnosis. There's not a blood test that says you have ALS. Digital biomarkers could be useful in two critical ways: tracking progression and early diagnosis. What we know for sure is that this is a lot of different diseases. We know that we have to do the right treatments in the right patients. Everybody talks about collaborating and working together and sharing things. There's not a sort of an infrastructure that fosters that in a meaningful way.
The sheer number of people that are going to develop a neurodegenerative disease in the next 10 years is going to basically bankrupt our country. It's like extraordinary what's going on in ALS. We've never had so much going on in terms of therapies in development. Brain health is now kind of the hot topic in the neurosciences.
We're beginning to see that some of the biomarkers that we've worked on for many years are becoming useful in clinical trials.
We're reaching an inflection point for digital biomarkers. The sensor technology is already there. Consumer electronics routinely measure breathing, movement, and speech. If we can couple those technologies with the right analytics, we'll have a huge impact.
Nine-year-old Todd Kelly reciting speech that could help treat and cure ALS.
The problem with ALS, unlike many other diseases, is they can't find a biomarker. The biomarker is what you can see is affected by a treatment.
I participate in the EverythingALS speech study. You record your speech and you're videotaped while you're doing various exercises and recording your speech.
Please say peak.
I'm amazed at how many people have watched my recent ALS reversals research talk. More than 4,000 in just the 9 days since it was posted. This is really a testament to you and all the great work that you're doing there at EverythingALS. And I'm glad to be working with you.
So I'll just walk through a little bit of, the infrastructure that we built for really taking advantage of AI and technology innovations to really make a difference. And what we realized was this is a system problem. And I'll tell you a little bit about how we actually put those infrastructure and a flywheel together and what we are doing in terms of bringing these digital biomarkers to market. And these are our partners. When I say consortia partners, a lot of the funding comes from the companies, and also they are going to be our customers where they actually implement our findings in the clinical trials. And of course, we have a lot of sensor companies, also the infrastructure companies as part of it. And this is very much integrated with the ecosystem of who we call scientific advisory board that comes from Harvard Medical, MGH, Temple University, and MIT. And we work very, very closely with them. And the overview of how we built this is really, it's a citizen-driven research. What that means is that we have over 7,000 ALS families who are integrated into subscriber, and about 500,000 families are in our social media from 60 countries. And this community actually, when we do our IRB approved studies, directly work with us on providing the information and the data we need. And that data converts into insight, working on a day-to-day basis with our neurologists and our scientific advisory board. And that insight is shared with our pharma partners. So all this is happening with portals. It's happening as a data infrastructure. And what is important is to make this a results-driven and agile process where this is happening on a every day and a weekly basis, where we are sharing the information and the data. And this is a totally our care to cure model with the citizen-driven approach, where we were able to bring all of these different ecosystem or silos working together. And what is important for us is that when you look at, our first initiative is the digital technology initiative, where today, without previous to EverythingALS, a lot of the measures were patient-reported outcome. That is in all of the brain disease, because we don't have imaging or blood result. It's patient-reported outcome. This is, as you can see on the left-hand side, there is 4 regions, and the questions are, how is your speech 0 to 4? How is your salivation 0 to 4? And the patients actually report back 0 to 4. We know that that is plagued with, incorrect answers. And so also, secondly, it's too gross. It's not granular enough to see the changes that might be happening. For example, my husband was on a walking stick. How is your walking? Is like, do you have a walking stick? Do you have a, do you have a walker, or do you have a wheelchair, or you can't walk at all? I mean, those are the 4, but, he was walking with a walking stick, but he could walk 60 steps without even pausing. And then he could only walk 3 steps with pausing. But, saying you walk with a walking stick is not a good measure of how the disease is progressing, and also if there's a treatment, if that has improved. So our goal is to make this digital sensors and the AI predictive models to say if someone is on the same regimen, might be not in 6 months during the trial, but further along, they could improve. So we do believe a lot of the treatments were probably worked, but we have no measures to really prove that. So we started off with bulbar, as you can see, walking and respiratory, and also fine motor. So we have digital tools, and we use the sensors that's already available, and we take the raw data and we look at the features that's available in these sensors to see which one is applicable for ALS progression. And our first study was speech, facial video, and cognition. And then we also kicked off another study, which is walking, breathing, speech, and cognition. And then right now we're studying people who don't have the disease, but they are high likelihood because of the gene carriers. They are gene carriers, so they're called pre-symptomatic. So the way EverythingALS platform works in our research is one of the things that we found in research is you do it once and then you move on to the next research. So we built it as a platform where we collect different data, and it's really our data and analysis framework. This AI engine can feed in new data where we're looking at multimodal. That is, when the audio changes, what happens to the breathing, what happens to the movement. So we're able to now analyze multimodal approach. And on the other hand, our integrated approach has one app for the patients and one dashboard for for the research, for the physician, and the consortia portal. And our origin itself, we started in May of 2020. We started off with what I showed you on the left-hand side with building the community. And then we started with creating an IRB-approved study, first one, where we were able to get over 800 people in 1 year, as opposed to 25 people get recruited in a traditional research done by, the old way of doing research. So we were able to show that the approach of citizen science and citizen research is not only accelerating, we also get large amount of data. And then we built our consortia of pharma companies in 2023. And we are now publishing. And also we have our first FDA pre-submission for speech as a biomarker, what we call listeners' effort scale. That is, how well do I understand you, which is, AI predictive model. We follow an agile methodology, and we all get excited about AI and machine learning and technology, but the technology is a tech platform, but we need to embrace it with good data, good process, and also agility to actually for the ecosystem to work together. So we follow citizen-driven research. What that means is that we are able to reduce the burden of these patients getting multiple requests, multiple sensors, where it's all integrated into one app and we remotely work with them. So our team has coordinators where the coordinators will work through Zoom for the patients and walk them through. And like I said, all the sensors are integrated into EverythingALS app. And care to cure is very important. When we say care to cure, what that means is that as you saw, the ecosystem of patients, and they actually are super users. So that means they'll take the sensors, they'll be able to tell us how it's working, and that data is also shared back with the patients to actually figure out how they need to monitor their their prognosis as a care. If they can actually predict what is the next step that happens, they can actually start getting prepared. And I have to say, from my personal experience, that was one of the black holes that we were in, is that we don't know what is going to happen next. And so we always look at care to cure as a model, and open innovation is big. That is, once we get the data so that we don't have to burden the patients with many little IRB approved studies with 25 people, 50 people, what we have is many researchers come directly to us, to the open innovation platform, and we are able to share that all the data with them, and we work with our data scientists and their data scientists. And the iterative learning model, so that we can immediately course correct. So because we're so integrated with the data collection and our patient with the citizen science, we can actually, course correct if we're not getting good data. Once we found out that because of Bluetooth, people would sometimes put it on the table and walk, and we were losing some of the data. So we were able to say, we sent them a different fanny pack or a holder where they can put their phone in there and walk. So there are things that we can do course correct. And like I said, super user evaluation is very important, where the patient community actually will evaluate these sensors And then we will be able to say, is this usable? Is the data right? So we actually do proof of concept and pilots before we can actually integrate into that research. And our product offering itself is, like I said, it's one app and one dashboard. So all of this integrated in many, many sensors that's coming in, it gets integrated, all the data flows into one place, and also it operates in one place. So our patients in the research can say, start the speech, start the walking, start the breathing. So it's all integrated through the API. And we did release our app recently, but this is going to be for the general population. So if you have anybody with ALS, caregivers, controls, you can actually download the app. And there is a care log. And also there is something called Connect. That is, patients can connect with other people who have ALS or caregivers to actually go through the journey and kind of learn from it. The importance of the citizen-driven research is that we can actually get diversity. If you can see that this 950 participants, we actually ethnic diversity and inclusion was very similar to the US population. We got also geographic distribution. So beyond the data collection, we do use this for our first study. We looked at the audio approach of using neural networks and predict the progression. And what we were able to see is that for some people, the speaking rate it actually holds, and some people actually slow down their sleeping rate so that you understand them better. So it's really these speaking rate and transcription confidence were not a good metric to really come up with, designing an algorithm. So we came up with listener's effort, which is also clinically meaningful. What that means is, how well do I hear you? How well do I understand you? And with that, what we did was we took all our speech data and we tagged it with speech pathologists who would actually rate these different samples called learner's effort rating. So with that, we were actually saw that even the smallest changes we were able to detect. And if you can see the blue, that means, the current system of rating 0 to 4, where, because it's such a granular gross measurement, people would say, oh, I'm at 3 and then 2. But then with learner's effort, which is 0 to 100, we're able to predict smaller changes over time. And we have a lot of different good results that we got, and our machine learning model with R-square able to predict about 0.86 with specificity. So, and also this is applicable for across many neurodegenerative disease, and we're very excited to go into movement, cognition, sleep, and other metric as well, which we are working on. That is our roadmap. We are looking at respiratory, like I said, motor movement and others. And we have 3x the research activity in 2024. We also launched what we call ALS and AI Research Hub. So with that, I'm going to stop my presentation. I know I went a little over, but if you have any questions, I would be more than happy to answer. And I'll hand it back to George.
Thank you so much for this great presentation. And I just want to remind our attendees to use the Q&A feature if they have questions or comments for our presenter. And actually, we do have a couple of questions, and maybe I'll start with the first one. If you can talk a little bit about IRB support for citizen scientists, and in general, given that this is slightly different, or maybe not just slightly different, but it is a different paradigm for the research enterprise. Okay. If you can talk a little bit about the experience about the IRB process specifically for citizen science.
Absolutely. The advantage of coming from an outsider is that I do not have a, normal, I don't know what a normal looks like. And also coming from Silicon Valley, where I'm in the tech thing, every day counts. We need to move the needle. So what I heard over and over again is, I'm waiting for the IRB approval. I have no idea why something takes 6 months to get approved, it's probably 10, 12 pages, and we know this, we do it over and over again. This is not rocket science. Okay, you need to be security, you have data security, data thing, but it's just not rocket science. So we did not understand that. So anyway, citizen science, we do work with a commercial IRB. It's called Solace IRB, and literally it's a 24-hour turnaround. So you can do expedited, or so this doesn't have to be the gating factor or time-consuming activity. And they do work with some of the institutions like I think UT Austin and others as well, but we work directly with Solace IRB.
Thank you. Another question we have is about the issue of health equity, and we have a comment from somebody from India who was asking about what could be done for patients in low to middle income countries who may not be able to afford therapy or rehab professionals, and the rehab professionals to patient ratio is skewed, especially in rural areas. And maybe I can expand on that question and add to that more broadly the issue of equity, because when we think about technologies, it is one tool to bridge these gaps, but on the other hand, it's also a tool that sometimes exacerbates these gaps.
So, I think it's a myth that technology is actually, exacerbates the equity, because everybody's got technology. I mean, who doesn't have Wi-Fi? I mean, literally, the way our sensor works with anybody with Wi-Fi, if they don't have Wi-Fi, they don't want to use, it's fine. We send them the 4G, pack with T-Mobile or one of those things that work with the sensor. So all these are not showstoppers, right? I mean, even if you look in United States, I'll come to the India and other countries, but even if you look at United States, 60% of Americans live 70 miles or plus from a neurology center. So the access is huge, and especially with the neuro disease, say ALS, where you're losing your function, or dementia, where you are not able to comprehend, you need to have caregiver support. So that means the family has to take time off to really go to the center. So that center thing does not work. This is one of the reasons why for about 70 to 90 years, we've not come up with much data, because the data exists, but asking people to come to the centers so that you can collect data is not going to work, because I have been there, and it was probably the most outrageous thing that I, personally went through when my husband was in clinical trial, that every 2 weeks we had to go to Mayo. I'm like, do you understand he has ALS? I mean, this was not designed for people with the disease. Because asking somebody to get on the plane, come over there and take a car and stay in the hotel where everything is new, and and if somebody needs breathing support, what are they going to do? So that is one of the reasons why people drop out and they can't go to these centers. So the answer is remote monitoring. Let's go where the patients are. Let's get the sensors, and we send them a box of sensors, or send them box of, we send them the phone as well. And then if they want to use their own phone, it's fine. And, and we work remotely through Zoom or through video conferencing. So that's how we actually bridge. We have all the way from 80 plus years to young in their 20 years in the research. So we have not seen any issues at all. And there's a myth that probably was 10 years ago or 5 years ago, but not anymore. People have bridged, and they really appreciate getting that data. So talking about equity and inclusive, that is very, very important. And the way to do it is go where the patients are and not have them come to certain institution. And, if you're going to do only at Johns Hopkins or only at certain location, it's only the people around there usually go to that location. Instead of that, citizen sciences, anybody can actually get involved. So, we have American Indians, we have Hawaiians, we have Pacific Islanders, we have, Spanish from different rural areas. And so we have got really ethnic diversity as well. And coming to India, that's another thing, right? If you use sensors, if you use technology, those are cheap. Those are a lot more cheaper than trying to say you have to go get an MRI, which doesn't get anything anyway. So I do believe that having sensors, nearable wearables are a way to actually grab a lot of information where we can actually do the progression. And also this will be used for treatments. That is, when you are in a clinical trial, we need to measure, what's happening in the clinical trial, if the drug is working or not. So we can actually think about how do we subtype that it works for some people and it doesn't work for some people.
We have a question about your organization, if it's a for-profit or not-for-profit, and what the business model may be, and if there's opportunities for smaller tech startups to collaborate.
Great question. We are a nonprofit. Everything ALS is a nonprofit, and our business model is sorry about that. Our business model is that we work with a lot of the consortia partners, and we have consortia membership. So the way we look at it is these sensors, this technology is not developed in silo. It's developed with the patients, with the pharma clinical trials design team, plus the neurologists, all the what we call KOLs, like, the knowledge leaders. So we actually do it with all of them. So a lot of the funding does come from the consortia partners, but we very, very clear, we're not a service company. That is, we don't do one-off projects. We actually work on solving the disease.
Another question about whether you're working with other NGOs like Cure CSP or MJFF, the American Parkinson Association, and if so, how are patient engagement and research?
Yeah, again, a great question. I have talked to the other NGOs. Michael J. Fox Foundation will say if they had to pick something, they would have picked digital biomarkers as the first one to go into. I do know Cure CSP and Parkinson's Association really well as well, and also Huntington disease. We've shared a lot of the information about what we are doing, and also ADDI and ADDF in Alzheimer's. We have not yet gone into applying this. There's a lot of interest, but think of it as like when Amazon first started, what did they do? It was an Amazon bookstore. We need to get all of these things working properly, all of these things connected. Think of it as like right now we're in the Amazon book, so we're looking at ALS, but doesn't mean that we can fan out and go into multiple disease all at once. So that's our goal, and we are working with them. We're talking to them. We're understanding what are the differences between ALS and other disease. So we're in the design process.
Another question, whether you're still recruiting non-symptomatic volunteers in your clinical trials, and if so, where one can find them, and how would the data privacy be protected?
Yes, we are recruiting non-symptomatic volunteers. If you go to everythingals.org and hit research, one of the research is asymptomatic. If you fill out the form, and my team will immediately get back to you and validate. So the data privacy, there are multiples for asymptomatic carriers. So we work with MGH, Prevent ALS. So if it's going to be blinded to the person with asymptomatic, that is also possible, so that the data is not shared. And this data is all about analysis for pre-diagnosis. So any of the data that will be shared is going to be de-identified. So we do take this very, very seriously about any of the patients, especially with asymptomatic, to make sure that we do destroy a lot of the data, because we don't want, so for example, when you do the neuro ID, we ask you for the neuro ID, certain information, but that will be destroyed. That only creates a unique ID. So so we do have, we work with the MGH partner in terms of the genetic, information.
The next question is one that researchers often ask themselves, which is, if you had unlimited resources for your work, in what direction would you wish to do more?
Yeah, I ask that question. Usually it doesn't come back to me. So thank you. I would actually try to get the clinical endpoints. So I would, right now we're doing respiratory, and I would actually, if I have more resources, I would, or limited resources, we are doing what we're doing. That is hyper focus on creating the clinical endpoint, so that we can have a better infrastructure to measure and also have the population to participate without the burden of having to go to the centers so that you can measure spirometer or respiratory.
Right. There's a question about more and more early onset dementia and any trends you see in earlier diagnosis of ALS in US population, or ways that technology could be used for a much earlier stage of diagnosis.
Yes. So the progression tracking, the other side of progression tracking is for early diagnosis. So that's why we're doing the asymptomatic study to see what are the changes that we can actually detect early. And we've actually seen that, you know, for example, speech changes in between controls and age-matched controls and ALS patients. We could have figured it out much before even it became symptomatic. And same thing with Bing search engine data. If you look at one of the, if you go to EverythingALS and publications, there is search engine data we took from Bing, Microsoft, and we work with Microsoft to look at all the, you know, searches people are doing, not what the material or the content, it's how they use their fingers, mouse movement, just the technical details. And we could easily figure out that we could have diagnosed 5-6 years before. And there are different features for ALS versus Parkinson's, but there's a lot of signature that we ignore that is actually happening.
There's a question about how startups working in the space of low-cost neuro rehab may collaborate with your organization.
Yeah, so we do, you know, encourage people to, you can send me an email, indu@everythingals.org. And we would love to work with different startups and see how we can actually help you accelerate, because if you win, we win. So our goal is to build this ecosystem of, you know, different neuro companies who are, and then we do have certain ability to give out credits and working with Amazon and other organizations.
There's a question whether you've tried to associate speech biomarkers with other molecular or signal or image-based biomarkers like EEG or MRI.
Not yet. No, we just looked at the speech biomarkers and the facial at the same time. We didn't find a lot of correlation just because it was hard to find the video because people were moving or, you know, but we do, we have not correlated with that with EEG yet. But our goal was to really, again, we can boil the ocean. So again, the question was, if you have limited resources, what would you focus on? We are looking at getting rid of this 0 to 4, how is your speech? Instead of that, let's do objective measure. So our goal is to really look at each of those metrics and say, let's come up with objective measure. And then we can actually look at how it correlates to multimodal.
Great. There's a question about your thoughts about current ALS treatments and if you think they're similar to Parkinson's disease or Alzheimer's.
You know, yes, and I guess if you see even Parkinson's, it's the same kind of, you know, 0 to 4 or, you know, very gross metric that we measure. And of course, Parkinson's has done a really great job in the last few years. But again, you know, I think I do believe that foundation has to change for us to do a good job. That is how we measure and how we diagnose early, because it's today we are diagnosing at stage 4 equivalent of cancer, any of the neuro disease. I mean, if you had told me that everybody in cancer will be at stage 4 and they will get treated, come on. I mean, we know what the answer would be, right? Why are we okay with brain diseases at stage 4? So our goal is to really look at foundational change, and then we can actually say, what are the treatments? Yes, there is a lot of treatment trials that's going on, but again, you know, this is a challenge. I mean, we keep going through the cycle of many treatments, not having able to show the subtypes of why it works for some people, why it can't work for other people. So we do believe that this will actually help with subtyping as well.
There's a question about caregivers, and you also had the experience in the caregiving role. Do you think caregivers have enough information? Are there tools that could help caregivers as well, perhaps technology tools, and maybe provide more access to coping or strategies for both for themselves, but also to keep their ALS patients perhaps slow down the progression?
What a great question. And, that is one of my passion, is to help the families. And when I say families, it's really the caregivers who also go through the turmoil, as having been there myself. If you come to EverythingALS.org, we have events every 2 weeks. And that's where, we all get together, and there is a lot of insights that happen from researchers around the world, share what they're doing, and afterwards we have what we call the open forum, which is not recorded, but people talk to each other, and many of the patients call it a happy hour, because that's the place where you can actually come in and share. And for me, it was like going through it. It was very lonely. It felt like I was the only one who was going through it. And we wanted to get rid of that, to say people can come in and share, and there are a lot of tools available, and it only can come with other people. Yes, Everything ALS app is helping with that connection, and our goal is to actually use much more, get feedback on what else we can do to actually help with the prediction of the disease progression, so you can start getting ready for what would happen next. That's another issue that we had was, I didn't know how to prepare myself.
We have a question about how advanced is your biomarker for walking?
We've collected the data, and we are in the mode of data analysis, but that doesn't mean that we're not looking at other sensors for walking and movement. So we are both looking at many sensors. We just started an IRB for 25 sensors. So it's called a sensor lab. So we want to do 25 studies all at the same time, looking at walking and also some of breathing. So movement is very important.
There's a couple of questions that talk about ALS as a disease. For example, to current date, would you comment on what would be the oldest age that any ALS patient has lived to? And there is another question about how young do you see ALS patients could be, and what would be the ALS disease progression across time?
I think the youngest person who was reported to have ALS was 8-year-old. And the disease progression across time, that's one of the things, is that it varies. And if you look at the curve, most 70 to 80% are in the 2 to 5 years from the time you get your first symptom, and it takes about 18 months to get diagnosed. So if you do the math, a lot of the people are in the fast progressors within 6 months after diagnosis, or 12 months after diagnosis, to completely losing their function. And some people are around for 18 years. So there is a curve, and there is a tail, like anything else. But disease does not progress equally for everybody, and because there's subtypes. I mean, people can start with limb versus bulbar, or and from our research, we recently found out that anybody with bulbar, that is, they start with the speech, there was a myth that they are the fast progressors. And what we found out was not really. Anytime, even if you have limb onset and you start having a progression, speech affected, you progress at the same time. So we are peeling the onion little by little, so that we can see what the subtypes are, how do we actually see how people are progressing, and kind of put more of a structure around it. But it's a multivariant, it's subtypes, and we really have not don't know much about it. But that's our goal, is to use AI and technology to really dig deep and see what the subtypes are.
There's a lot of comments about how people have enjoyed the presentation and also congratulating you for channeling frustration and outrage with the health system into positive change for the foundations of diagnosis. I think a couple of people asked for your email again, and we put it in the chat. It's Indu@EverythingALS.org, right?
Yes.
So I really want to thank you for a wonderful presentation and a lot of discussion that came up, and remind folks who may have further questions or comments to contact you directly. We will be uploading the recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel in a couple of days. Our next webinar is Thursday, October 10th at noon with Dr. Jessica Anker from Vanderbilt University Medical Center, who will be talking about the benefits of telehealth for older adults during the COVID pandemic. Again, Indu, I want to thank you so much for this great presentation and for joining us today, and thank everybody for attending as well.
Thank you so much for having me. And I really appreciated all the questions from the community and really excited about what would hold as a future for us and what technology brings in and for all of you. So thank you, George, for having me.